Welcome to Momo Tales. Once upon a time, in the golden kingdom of Aurelia, where the rooftops shimmered like morning dew, and the streets glowed softly beneath lantern light, there lived a gentle girl named Cinderella. She hadn't always lived the way she did now. Once, her life had been filled with laughter, warm meals, and the loving voice of her father. But after he passed away, everything changed. Her stepmother moved into their home with her two daughters, and slowly, room by room, kindness disappeared from the house like a candle being blown out. Cinderella was no longer treated like family but more like a servant. From sunrise till nightfall, she swept the floors until dust clung to her like clouds. She scrubbed pots until her fingers ached and carried heavy buckets of water that left marks across her hands. Her dresses tore often, and no one bothered to mend them. Yet through it all, Cinderella stayed gentle. She believed that even in a world that had forgotten kindness, one should never forget how to be kind. In a small nook near the kitchen hearth lived a little mouse named Pipin. Unlike ordinary mice who only cared about crumbs and squeaks and hiding from broomsticks, Pipin was different. He loved to watch Cinderella work, not because he enjoyed seeing her toil, but because he admired her. He saw how she hummed softly even when tired, how she paused to rescue a beetle from a water bucket, how she stitched torn cloths with care even though it wasn't for herself. Pipin, with his tiny paws and bright curious eyes, loved to make things too. While the world saw only a mouse, he saw himself as a helper, a friend. Pipin had two little companions, whisker-twitching fellows named Pip and Nip. They were smaller, quicker, and somewhat mischievous, always stealing crumbs and scurrying behind flour sacks. But Pipin was different. He found scraps of fabric left behind from old clothing and dragged them into his tiny corner. He collected threads like treasures and once even managed to roll a shiny button twice his size all the way to his sleeping space. And his bed? Oh, his bed was a wonder, an old slipper of Cinderella's from when she was just a little girl. No one used it anymore. Cinderella had set it aside carefully, and Pipin had claimed it as the coziest place in all of Aurelia. Every night, after Cinderella finished her chores and sat by the little window to rest, she would speak softly to herself, dreaming aloud. She spoke of faraway mountains covered in snow, of markets filled with silks and music, of oceans that glittered under silver moons. Pipin would listen from inside the slipper, his tiny heart swelling with every word. In those moments, the shabby house felt like a palace of imagination. One evening, after a particularly long day where Cinderella's dress tore again and she quietly stitched it with a sigh, Pipin made a promise in his tiny, squeaky heart. I will make her something beautiful, something that belongs only to her, something made with love. And so, when the moon rose and the house grew silent except for the soft snores of the stepsisters, Pipin began his secret work. He found a piece of soft, silvery cloth in the attic one night, a forgotten scrap from an old gown. He dragged it inch by inch to his corner. He discovered tiny pearls that had once fallen from a broken necklace. One by one, he rolled them like little moons and stored them in a thimble. And he found a spool of golden thread, glimmering like sunlight trapped in silk. Night after night, Pipin stitched with determination. His paws grew tired. He pricked himself on needles more than once. But he kept going, imagining the way Cinderella's face might glow if she had something special, something made just for her. A whole year passed like this, a quiet secret stitched in the shadows. Then, one bright morning, the town crier marched through the streets, ringing a bell that echoed through every corner of Aurelia. Hear ye! A grand ball shall be held at the king's palace. Every young lady in Aurelia is invited, for the prince shall choose his bride. The stepsisters shrieked with excitement. New dresses, new shoes! Oh, how the prince will fall in love with us! They pranced and twirled as if they were already wearing crowns. Cinderella stood quietly by the doorway, her heart fluttering with a little hope she tried to hide. Oh, Pipin, she whispered while sweeping. Just once. How lovely it would be to go. To just stand in the light and not feel like I am invisible. Her voice was soft, almost shy. Pipin's whiskers trembled. That night, when Cinderella sat alone, he scurried forward, dragging a small bundle wrapped in cloth. With a proud squeak, he pulled it open to reveal a pair of slippers, not ordinary ones, but slippers stitched from silver cloth, lined with tiny pearls, and threaded with gold. They shimmered like starlight. Cinderella gasped softly. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not sad tears. They were the kind that form when something gentle touches a heart. Oh, Pipin, they're beautiful. They're the most beautiful slippers I've ever seen, she whispered. If only I could wear them to the ball. But before the moment could bloom, the stepsisters burst into the room, mocking her dream. You go to the ball? Who would want to see you in rags? They snatched the broom and locked her in her room, laughing as they left for the palace in their glittering gowns. Night settled. The fire crackled low. Cinderella sat on the floor, tears rolling down her cheeks like quiet raindrops. And then a soft, golden light filled the room. Her fairy godmother appeared, gentle and glowing. You have been kind, even when no one showed you kindness, she said. Tonight, dear child, you shall go to the ball. With a graceful wave of her wand, Cinderella's torn dress transformed into a gown of shimmering blue, flowing like a river of stars. Pumpkins became a golden carriage, and mice, including Pip and Nib, became proud white horses with silver manes. But the slippers Pipin made stayed exactly as they were. The fairy godmother smiled knowingly. These slippers are already magic, not by spell, but by love. Cinderella, heart alight with wonder, stepped into Pipin's slippers. They fit perfectly, as if made by fate itself. The palace of Aurelia glowed like a jewel beneath the night sky. Music floated through the air like silk. When Cinderella walked in, every candle flame seemed to shine brighter. The prince saw her and, without a word, asked for her hand. They danced slow, gentle, as if time itself had paused to watch. But then the clock began to strike. Midnight. Cinderella gasped and fled, her gown swirling behind her like a blue comet. Down the steps she ran. One slipper slipped from her foot and landed on the marble stairs with a soft, echoing sound. The prince picked it up, holding it like something sacred. I will find her, he said quietly, even if I must search all of Aurelia. The next morning, the prince and his men went door to door. The stepsisters tried to squeeze their feet into the slipper until their faces turned red, but it would not fit. They tried to lie, to say no other girls lived there, but Pipin would not allow it. With Pip and Nip, He dragged the second slipper, the one Cinderella still had out from under her bed. They pushed it across the floor, squeaking with all their might until it tumbled into the hall right as Cinderella appeared, breathless and confused from chasing them. The prince's eyes lit like dawn breaking. "It's you," he said softly. He knelt, placed the slipper on her foot, and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Pipin had made it just for her. And so, not long after, Cinderella and the prince were married in the grandest celebration Aurelia had ever seen. At the royal wedding feast, Pipin, Pep, and Neb had the best little seats near the golden plates, nibbling crumbs with pride. The royal tailor noticed the stitching on Cinderella's slippers and said in amazement, "These are the finest stitches I have ever seen. Who made them?" Cinderella knelt beside Pipin and smiled. "A very dear friend." From that day on, Pipin became the royal sewing assistant, darting along threads, tightening fine silk, and adding perfect little stitches only he could reach. The gowns and suits made in Aurelia became famous throughout the land. But no matter how grand life became, every evening, when the sewing was done and the golden sun dipped behind the castle walls, Cinderella would sit by the window with Pipin curled in her lap. She would speak of new dreams, of faraway lands, of stars beyond stars, and Pipin would listen, whiskers trembling with happiness, for he was not just a mouse. He was a friend who stitched love into every thread. The end. Subscribe to Momo Tales for more adventure.